All right, so moving swiftly into our penultimate session, I believe, before the great Brian Hubbard takes the stage. We've heard so much, from about the science and the data, but what are the real stories of the transformations that people are experiencing through the use of psychedelics? I suppose let's just dive straight in. Perhaps we could start at the end of the table and I'll allow everyone to introduce themselves briefly and then take to the floor for perhaps 4 or 5 minutes and tell us where you're coming from and what you were dealing with and how psychedelics have managed to help you and the extent to which those beneficial effects have endured over time and perhaps what changes you've made in your life as part of all of that.
Want to start again? Want to start?
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great.
Hi, everybody. Can everybody hear me? I'm going to tell you a story about myself, and it's a story I've never, ever told in public before. It's a story about my life, and it relates to this, but my experience with this drug saved my life. What's in this box almost killed me, and I only paid $200 for what's in this box. What's in that box almost killed me. I would sit in my house and I would stare at the television all day long while my wife was at work, pretending I was okay. And when I say I stared at the television, I didn't watch television. I was so catatonic with depression. I sat in my home and I stared straight ahead at a television that wasn't playing anything, that was off. And the next time I'd look at the clock was because my wife turned the doorknob coming home from work 8 hours later. The entire time I would sit on that couch, I would think every single minute, how can I kill myself and not break his heart? My son, Sean, right there, a D1 rower. My son, Sean. I'd think, how can I not break my other son's heart, who's at Rutgers for engineering? How can I not break my wife's heart? Everything was falling apart and I couldn't do anything about it. Nothing was helping me. And the reason I was so depressed is I got arrested for buying ayahuasca. I paid $200, excuse me, sir, in the striped shirt there, right there. I paid $200 for that, what's in that box. Let's say it was the ayahuasca in that box. It would fit in that box. I was a millionaire. I made millions of dollars. I worked my whole career at Fortune 500 companies. Last week, General Petraeus told me it was a pleasure to help me working through Afghan evacuation. I know people from Delta Force. I know Navy SEALs. Every hero I've had as a child is my friend today because I had to do something with my life to change my life. Because I knew I was gonna die. I was gonna kill myself. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every minute of every day, all I thought about was that. Nothing would help, but I hung on. And to give my children comfort, I said to my children, I want you to know, I want you to be comforted by this. When you leave for school, I will not commit suicide. Think about that. Think about saying to your children to comfort them. When you go to school, to college that I sent you to, on the back of a lifetime of hard work, to comfort you, son, don't worry about your son. Don't worry about your dad committing suicide. You take your exams, you take care of your life, you let me worry about my life, I'll take care of everything. At the time, I was evacuating soldiers from Afghanistan. I was working Afghan evac because I started to hate America so much because they had taken my life away. For $200, they sent a SWAT team to my house, knocked my door down. They had guns on my kids. He can tell you if you'd like. They had a gun on my son that was 14. They had a canine in my son's room that bit my dog. I was afraid I was going to get killed because a guy ran through my house with a gun, knocked me 10 feet back into my bedroom, almost broke my bedpost off of my big old Ethan Allen bed in my fancy old house. And I'm sure all my neighbors are going, what in the hell is happening over at Andy's house? Because the Department of Homeland Security's out there, a SWAT team, armed men, 2 canines, 4 patrol officers. And guess what? Sean's girlfriend's dad is our good friend, and he's a policeman. Later, I had a panic attack because I worked on war crimes, collecting war crimes. I'm telling you right now, folks, you're looking at a guy that's a goddamn saint. I have done more for this country and for you people, and none of you even know about it, and I don't want any thanks. I want no thanks, because I do it because I love America. I love my country. I love my community. I love the police. But I can't blame the police because I made a mistake. And I do not blame the police for breaking my door down with the SWAT team and all that. It was my fault. I made a mistake inadvertently. I made a mistake that caused me to have my life pulled apart. I lost $600,000 in income. It took me 5 years to clear my record. It took me 4 years to get an expungement. And I did not object. I admitted to the crime. They knew I wasn't a drug dealer. They charged me as a first-degree felon. First-degree felony has 20-year penalty. They charged me as a narco trafficker in a school zone with intent to distribute to school children. Now, I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I spent my entire life doing everything right, every single thing. And I did it well, and I worked my ass off because I am not a smart guy like this guy or all these smart panelists. I am an average guy. I have attention deficit disorder, and I just struggled through life. I graduated at the bottom of high school. I struggled through life. But I got sober when I was very young. When this happened to me, I was 31 years sober. 31. And you know what the remedy was for me from the state of New Jersey was I was court ordered to go on benzodiazepine. Now, if you know anything of benzodiazepine, you'll know that's an addictive drug. I had never taken in my life, I've never been addicted to drugs. So not only was I accused of being a narco trafficker selling drugs to school kids, I lost my ability to teach school. That's something I did too in the inner city. I can't teach inner city school kids anymore. Can't do that. I can't work in my field because I need an FBI background check. The people I talk to and I deal with, even right now saying this, I'm nervous just telling my life story in public because my life has already been torn away and I rebuilt it. I rebuilt it with the best and the brightest in this world. 4-star generals are telling me weekly, I am proud of you. I am proud. General Petraeus sent me a note last week. And I said, General, what you did for me, it was a small thing. It was one introduction. It saved a man's life. It put a man in a safe house for a year and a half. It saved his entire family. It put his whole family in another safe house, not because of what I did, and I did a lot. I went to Congress. I went to the Senate. I lobbied. I joined groups. I started a nonprofit called 22 for You. I would hope you would support. I don't even have my links or my notes out there. I can't show you my photographs because everyone is in danger. And I can tell you when I did this work, I was terrified because I was watching people be tortured to death. And I was thinking to myself, if they could come here, they would do the same thing to my kids, to my boy, to my wife, to your family. So I sacrificed myself, and it broke me. It broke me entirely. I had 2 nervous breakdowns doing this work in 4 years, and I don't care. I will not quit. We are the United States of America. This is the greatest country in the world. We have some problems, but we solve problems. We are a great people. These problems with these drugs, I've had them all. I took antidepressants for 20 years. They did nothing for me. I almost killed myself because I was put on benzos. I took ayahuasca. It changed my life. It finally relieved the depression I suffered my whole life. When you have important jobs and a lot of stress, a lot of times your whole life is a pressure cooker. And when you're dealing with war crimes, child trafficking, I can't even tell you what I'm dealing with. I can't even tell you in public the things I've seen. I can tell you there was times I would wake up screaming no, thinking that they'd come to my house for my boys. It damaged me. It broke me. It broke my mind and body and spirit, broke my soul. I've never seen anything like I've seen in Afghanistan, but I'm proud of the work I did there. I refuse to be cowed into a corner and called a drug addict, a narco trafficker, or any other damn thing. Let me tell you something. My name is Andrew Walker, and I'm a patriot. I'm a medical patient. Yeah, I'm a patient, but I'm a patriot. Am I a guy that got arrested? Yeah, I am a guy that got arrested. And guess what? I fucked up. It was my fault. Pardon my language. It was my fault. I took full responsibility. I remember the saddest moment of my life is when my eldest son came home from when I came home from jail. I was in jail overnight. That was fun. It's a great experience. And I said, I need to sit you boys down. I need to talk to you about what happened because this is very traumatic. You know, he was held at gunpoint with a SWAT team member. My local police were very polite and very professional. And when I had a panic attack, I threw one of our local police over a wall and I wrestled with the other 6. And I was completely out of my mind. And they were very professional. If I didn't have those cops, if I didn't have the success I had in my life, I could have been killed by the police in my home. If I didn't have several $100,000 laying around because I worked my ass off my 30 years, I wouldn't have been able to not work and hide in my house because that's what I did. Because I don't want you to know. I don't know you. I don't want you to know. I don't want anybody to know what happened to me. I want you all to think of me from my resume. Here's a guy who has got his shit packed. Here's a guy General Petraeus is talking to. General Miller, who ran all of Special Forces, if you don't know who General Miller is. Any soldiers in this room? There you go. So, you know, I have never been a soldier. This will show you the quality of soldiers in this country. I have never been a soldier. I have never been in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. I got thrown out of the Navy in 2 weeks for beating somebody up for calling my mother a bad name. I know admirals of the Navy that are admirals of submarines, admirals of the Navy that are in NATO. I know and have been taught irregular warfare from people at NATO. I learned and did propaganda for Ukraine. I saved people's lives from Afghanistan. I'm telling you right now, folks, if we are going to take people like this guy, the soldier, and we are going to leave them in war zones, or when we bring them back, we're not going to care, we're going to have a hell of a lot of trouble. And we do. And these drugs are effective. I've taken every one of them, and they saved my life. When I took ketamine, the first infusion, I remember the doctor said to me, "How do you feel?" And I said, "I don't know. That was really a weird experience." And I can tell you, every time I've had an experience with psychedelics, I have PTSD. There was a murder in my family of a baby, and I don't want to go into that too much, but there was a 3-year-old baby murdered in our family, my nephew's baby. And it gave me PTSD. And because it's so bad, I have this guarded feeling all the time. And whenever I would do any kind of a psychedelic, I would always have a sword and a shield with me all the time. Every time I'd have a dream, I would be carrying a sword and a shield. And I don't know why that is. It just is. But I did that ketamine. First treatment, I had my sword and I had my shield. Second one, I had my sword, I had my shield. The guy I saw there in the dream, he said, "You're not going to need that, son. You're not going to need that here." The third experience, I had a dream. I met this guy, long white beard. He looked like Gandalf at the gates of like what looked like heaven. or, you know, some futuristic place the rich people are going to live when we all die with the robots. So I get to this futuristic place, long white beard. The guy meets me. I have my sword and shield. And he says to me before he lets me through the gate, he said, "Son, you're not going to need that anymore." He said, "You're not going to need that anymore." And I said, "Sir, I know that, but it gives me comfort and I'd like to take it anyway." And he said, "As you wish, son, come with me and come to paradise." And we walked through and I had an experience there. And the third time I had the experience, I didn't have a sword. I didn't have a shield. I didn't have anything. So I'll close with that. But I can tell you, I do outreach work in Afghanistan. I do it in my own name, and I do it without any cover at all. And I don't have any fear at all because I have so much faith in the soldiers of this country. I have faith in us to solve our problems. And I know I made a mistake, and I know it's embarrassing. I don't like to talk about it. But you know what? I need to talk about this because my life shouldn't have been ripped away. My college fund for my son that I had worked so hard for, it shouldn't have been used to just live and buy bread. It should have been used for his college. And to his credit, he's taken the weight. That dude is a front runner. Look closely at that man right there because he's going to run things someday. That guy.
All right. Thank you so much, Andy.
Outside the table. It was so cool. I had such a cool.
Well, yeah, I really appreciate, such a compelling story. You've come a long way with the ayahuasca and the ketamine, and it gives us inspiration, for us all, and certainly reassurance that American foreign policy is doing such good in the world. Our next speaker.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Brennan. Thank you for being here, if you can hear me. Before I get too far with that one, I'm proud to say for 35 years, this man has been my friend. So, thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay, I got to read. I'm Mike Brennan. I'm a cancer survivor living with chronic pain. For many years, I was also living with depression that came from the pain and the isolation it creates. I've spent 2 decades advocating for medical cannabis patients, but I'm here today to speak from a different place, a deeply personal one. There was a period in my life where I wasn't really living. I was enduring. Chronic pain becomes your everyday reality. It does more than hurt. It erodes identity. You forget who you are beyond the pain. You forget how to feel connected. There's a loneliness that settles in your bones. I sought treatment not because I wanted something new, but because I was running out of road. Traditional medicine kept me alive, but it didn't help me want to be alive. And that distinction matters. September of last year, I began CAT, or ketamine-assisted therapy. Therapeutic relationship, the preparation, the intention, the integration that allow the experience to become healing instead of just interesting. And believe me, it's a very interesting experience sometimes. What I gotta get back to though is ketamine doesn't erase my pain. What it did was reconnect me to myself. During one session, I experienced something I can only describe as widening. Like the walls I had built to protect myself, it softened just enough for light to get in. Not a dramatic vision, not some cosmic explosion, just a quiet realization. I'm not broken. I'm wounded. Wounds can heal, especially in connection. That moment changed the direction of my life. It didn't happen overnight. There's no miracle drug, but cat gave me was a doorway. It's a path back towards meaning, presence, compassion. Compassion for myself. That was to advocate for yourself after years, years. From there, healing became something active. Integration sessions, mindfulness, non-duality practice, working in service to others, my time in nature, and yeah, healing moments with my dogs. I've been some of the greatest teachers of unconditional love and presence. Stella here just turned 10. She's been working as my service dog since she was a puppy, and this little one's just starting her training. So I wrap this up, and as I began to return to myself, something else happened. The people around me, my family, my community, started to reconnect me too. This healing is relational. When one person comes back into their life, the whole system breathes differently. I share this today not to claim that psychedelic therapies are for everyone or that they are easy or that they are a cure. They're not. They require support, guidance, preparation, and ongoing integration. They can stir up pain as well as relief. This takes courage, this work. But I share my experience because patients deserve access to paths that restore dignity, meaning, and connection. For many of us, psychedelic assisted therapies are not about escape. They're about coming home. So if there's a message I'm going to leave with you today, it is this. Healing is not about fixing what is wrong. It's about remembering what is whole. We do not suffer alone. There is a path back to ourselves, and we walk it together. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name's Joe McKay. I'm a retired FDNY firefighter and a board member of Cluster Busters, which is a patient advocacy group for people living with cluster headache. I'll try to condense the last 25 years of my journey in a 2-minute, 3-minute elevator pitch. September 11, 2001, my fire company had a fundraiser that day, and it was on a golf course. I don't golf, so I had offered to work that tour, but my buddy Schatzy ended up picking it up. So he worked. I was on the golf course when we got word of what was happening downtown. We went in the clubhouse, and we watched it on TV, and I called the firehouse, and I spoke to Schatzy. And we talked fire department stuff quick, hung the phone up with him, and then we saw the second plane hit, and we knew it was no accident. The total recall was issued, meaning every police officer and firefighter, paramedic, EMT has to come into work. So a small group of my fellow firefighters grabbed a New York City Transit bus, commandeered it, filled it with equipment, and made our way to the World Trade Center. For the first 2 days, we worked around the clock, putting out fires and searching for the missing. During that time, I got phone calls from Jeanette, who was Schatzy's wife, and she had asked if I had seen him, and at that time it was still chaotic. I said, no, we're not really sure where anybody is right now. And I also got a call from my wife's best friend, Denise, who had her husband, Walter, who was a very good friend of mine, above where the first plane hit, and he was able to text her. He was trapped up there. He sent her a message with the 3 people that he was with. One of the women was pregnant, and they said that it's too hot, too smoky, you can't get down. The firemen are coming up to get us, and I love you. And his wife watched the tower collapse shortly after that. And I took that phone call, and I had to tell her a story that I had heard, a rumor that people made it out of the building alive. They rode the building down, but turned out not to be true. About 48 hours later, a list of the missing firefighters was put together, and 343 firefighters were killed. 26 of them I knew on a first-name basis, and 4 of them were from my company, and 1 of them was Schatzy. And I found out later on that Shotzi's wife was actually at the doctor's office that morning confirming that she was pregnant with their third child. Just the icing on the cake. So for the next 6 months, we worked on the pile. We covered tours in the firehouse. We took care of the families of those we lost, and we were going to funerals or memorials first. And then when we recovered the remains, we had funerals. So it was 6 months of that, day after day. And if we weren't doing that, we were drinking. There I was, not thinking things couldn't get any worse. And I woke up at 1 a.m. feeling like someone just stabbed me in the eye with a burning hot ice pick. I swore I was having an aneurysm. I was going to die. Went to the emergency room, and long story short, a couple of weeks later, I got diagnosed with cluster headache, otherwise known as the suicide headache. And it gets that name because over 70% of us have suicidal ideation during an attack. So there I was, thinking things couldn't get any worse, and now I have this incurable pain condition that I got to deal with. For 10 years, I tried different medications, pharmaceutical medications that did nothing, little to nothing, horrible side effects that cost me a ton of money. And in 2011, I was medically retired from the fire department, and it did not sit well with me. Now I had lost my career and my identity, and I had no problem finding painkillers for the back problems that I had and also for the headaches. So I got addicted to tramadol and Oxycontin simultaneously. In 2017, I had a cycle of cluster headache attacks that was going on for 7 months. I was getting 8 attacks a day, and the attacks lasted anywhere from a half hour to 90 minutes. And at that time, I started planning how I was going to take my life and how I was going to do it without getting making it look like an accident. And I came up with I was going to crash my car into an overpass. I was desperate, and I reached out online. I did another Google search, and I found cluster buses. And I read that a study had been done by Harvard with psychedelics. Long story short, I called a friend of a friend, and who knew a guy that used to go to Grateful Dead concerts. And I ended up with a small dose of psilocybin mushrooms and got the nerve up. Wouldn't you know it, it worked. The next day, that excruciating pain that I had been dealing with was gone. Yeah, so after that, I continued to use lower doses at home, and I had an experience where I realized, this out-of-body experience, I realized I had PTSD. I could see it. I could see the old me, and it's very difficult to explain what a psychedelic experience is like. The best I could do is like the old me woke up in my head, and I saw how I had changed, and I knew I needed to change. And I realized as well that the opiates I was taking were not for the physical pain. I wanted to be numb. I didn't want to deal with that emotional pain. So I got a hat trick from psilocybin. It stops the most painful condition known to man in cluster headache. It woke me up to the fact that I had PTSD, and it made me seek treatment, and it got me off of the opiates. And that's my story. Thank you.
On? Nope, maybe. Yeah, they got me. Hi, everybody. I'm Jared Rinehart. I work for a wonderful organization called Heroic Hearts Project. I was in the Marine Corps for 5 years and also as a private military contractor for another 4 years after that. Getting out of the Marine Corps was the hardest thing I probably ever went through in my entire life. One of the most difficult transitions I think a human being can go through, especially in our country. I have a saying that most of us that get out of the military don't make it out of the first 2 years alive. And that is showing in statistics. So don't need to get into trauma dumping all over you, but let's just say I was in a really, really bad place. I was drinking constantly. I was fighting constantly. I couldn't hold a job. I was angry. I was violent. I was getting a divorce. And I hated my life so much, I was just going to go be a private military contractor because where I knew what I could do was in Afghanistan or Iraq. So I'd just much rather stay out there instead of integrate with all you wonderful people. So during that time as a private contractor is when I started to look into psychedelics, but not in the healing sense, but just more of a I'm going to go home and party with my friends sense. And my friends being punk rock kids from Washington State were all about it. So they decided to get me to try some psychedelics. That led me on a journey of, let's just say it really opened the aperture of my awareness, slowly but surely at first. I didn't go into it with intentions or medical or anything like that, but it really started to open my eyes about it's not just about me, and that there are more people on this planet and all of that. And then in 2017 or 2016, I apologize, I had a very profound experience in the jungles of Peru. And that turned my whole life around. I stopped drinking. I stopped doing recreational substances. My anger and depression was completely behind me. And I went back to Iraq after that experience on a contract for 10 months. And then after that, I decided I didn't really want to do that kind of work anymore. And so I went on a healing journey that has led me to getting remarried, having 2 wonderful kids, having stability in a job, working in an environment where I'm now helping people instead of hurting people. I am in a place where I can say that I am completely indistinguishable from the person I used to be. And that's all because of working with these wonderful medicines. And they have led me to a place of peace and understanding and love that I never, ever, ever in the world thought I could get to. I didn't know. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for those experiences. So I owe my entire life to psychedelic medicines for waking me up and letting me see that the real issues in my life, the roots of them were me, and that it was up to me to fix those things. So one thing I'll leave you all with, at least as a person who works in the psychedelic space, is that psychedelics are a wonderful, wonderful experience for people who want to change their life, but it will only show you what's going on in your life. It won't do any heavy lifting for you. It's up to you or the person taking them to make the effects of the integration afterwards for it to actually take effect. You can take psychedelics the rest of your life and not change a thing. It won't change anything. But if you want to make a difference in your life and you want to make changes, they can really highlight the things that you really need to do for yourself to move forward. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Hello? That was a perfect segue into what I'm going to talk about. So my name's Eddy Shoop. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and today I'm going to be talking about my experience receiving psilocybin-assisted therapy in a clinical trial. And I've kind of gone like back and forth a little bit about what I specifically want to talk about because there's so many different aspects of the experience that I think are so important. But there was one person that I listened to once who talked about their actual dosing session and the visuals that they had and the kind of the breakthrough that they had through the dosing session itself. And since that stuck with me so much, I decided to talk about this is only one key takeaway from my dosing session and try and describe it to the best of my ability. So to give you some context, I received 1 heroic dose of psilocybin, double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled, blindfolded, music in the room, music through the headphones, on an inpatient psychiatric unit where I had to stay overnight for 7 nights, which, as many of us may know, is not the ideal place for healing, which is an entirely different conversation for another day. But the experience was still really powerful and positive for me. So I'm laying there and this song comes on. It's all nonverbal music. It's playing through my headphones and it's playing in the room, so there's really no escaping it. And this song is the most horrible song I've ever heard. I'm really sorry to whoever wrote this song, but for some reason during my dosing session, I was feeling a deep sense of hatred towards the music. And it was making me feel almost repulsed, like I wanted to throw up, and I'm a emetophobic, so it was a highly uncomfortable situation to be in. And the music eventually morphed into a visual where with every beat of the song, a petal appeared. And it was like a long, skinny flower petal. And they were all different colors, and they were all my least favorite colors. And these petals eventually formed into this structure that was kind of like swaying back and forth, and it was breathing. And when you think about like a Christmas tree, when you take it home, they'll like wrap it in string so it's super tight. And then when you get home, you cut it open, it kind of falls open and almost blooms, and it looks beautiful. And this always reminded me of a Christmas tree that was wrapped up because it was stuck together and it was like moving and swaying, but for some reason it wasn't blooming. Anyway, I thought this thing was the ugliest thing I've ever seen in my life. It made me feel even more repulsed than the sound of the music. And suddenly I was laying in the most uncomfortable situation that I'd ever been in my life, on the verge of throwing up. And yeah, it was just horrible. And so eventually this vision morphed into a way where I was kind of looking at it from the side. And then I realized that I was looking at myself. And so the music that I hated became this visual that I hated, and that I was even more repulsed by than the music. And then this all became me. And so I hated myself, and I was repulsed by myself. And, through the hours and hours of integration afterwards, I kind of unpacked all of this, and I had realized that my whole life, this voice in the back of my head telling me that that wasn't good enough, that was weird. Why did you do that? Like just all of this like hatred towards myself that I was projecting onto other people, and tricking my brain into thinking that other people were thinking those things of me. And I was thinking them of myself the whole time. And so the fact that I'm sitting here being perceived by this many people, I will let that speak for itself as to like how far I've come since my session.
Mike Holovacs. Hi, y'all can hear me. I'm going to try and make this quick. I actually brought prepped material. So my parents divorced as a preteen, and the first memory of emotional neglect that I have was when I was 3 years old. There were thoughts of self-harm before the divorce and many years of anger, anxiety, depression, self-worth issues. My father never addressed his issues going back to the untimely death of his father when he was a teenager. And what I suspect, and for important legal reasons can't prove, was probably exposure to dishonorable Catholic priests in North Jersey in the 1960s. My mother was narcissistic and incapable of owning her behavior. I grew up with her often saying, if it's not about me, I don't give a shit. She saw me as an extension of herself and not my own person. I joined the New Jersey Air National Guard in 2001, was activated for 9/11, and then deployed overseas twice. I was having persistent depression at that time, but was in a military job where reporting a mental health concern would have hurt my career because I worked with explosives. Pivot to 13 years working in hotels and casinos led to odd working hours, irregular sleep, near constant state of activation, and the dark side of customer service. You're always giving of yourself, and you need to have an ability to refill that cup and love yourself. And by that point, around 2015, in hindsight, the cup was dead empty, and I saw no reason or ability to fill it. I specifically remember telling my wife that I'd accomplished a lot, but I had an empty happy tank that felt like it was impossible to fill. I tried talk therapy on and off from age 8 or 9 up to today. Antidepressants from 2017-ish to 2024, Wellbutrin and Zoloft, and intermittent therapies with a couple of dosage bumps along the way. And I got numb to the point that I started to prefer feeling like shit just so I could feel something. I went to an informed consent workshop, especially for vets, in the fall of 2023, and later quit both medications cold turkey with nothing but brain zap headaches. I'm aware of how lucky I am on that front. In 2024, I gave EMDR a try, and I had a phenomenal provider. My wife said to me that whatever I was doing was working, and that, in her words, the rage was gone. latent anger and an inability to let go of perceived slights was still there after the EMDR. It handled a lot of the subconscious things, but everything angered me and my short temper was still there. Your children laughing is said to be one of the most beautiful sounds in the world, and all it did was make me angry. By 2025, I'm holding down 3 jobs and I'm successful by anybody's measures, but I'm emotionally shut down with my family having to tiptoe around me, and I'm sitting there in my downtime wondering to myself if I should have a friend hold my guns. I found out about psychedelics thanks to Marcus Capone's appearance on Sean Ryan. My father passed away in June of 2024, and the first thing that I told my wife was that some of the money he left me should be used to get my mind right, because I was reaching a point where I couldn't experience life without anger and self-hate. And after months of research and soul searching, I decided to pursue an Ibogaine journey in hopes of finally touching that deep-seated pain and anger that the traditional therapies had only partially done anything about. The idea felt both daunting and hopeful because I was searching for something that could reach the places that the therapy and the medication couldn't reach. And there was a lot of fear, a lot of anticipation, but there was also a really small spark of hope that maybe I could find lasting relief and reconnect with my family in some kind of meaningful way. So, long story short, Tijuana this past June. Early in the Ibogaine journey, I had the sensation that I was in free fall on my back, but my body and my head were rotating in opposite directions. So think like the ball in the roulette wheel. I mentioned this to my integration coach after the fact, and he said, "That's easy. I can tell you what that means. Your head and your heart weren't aligned." For the last couple of years before Ibogaine, I was depressed to the point that I was unable to mow my lawn. My wife would mow the lawn and I would do everything else in the yard care around the house. And the medicine made fun of me about this. Ibogaine is a teacher, and it gets really deep, and it will tell you things that you are not prepared for. And the easiest way to explain it is that the voice sounded like it's a small world run through a synthesizer. And no less than 50 times did it say to me, "Girls don't cut lawns, girls don't cut lawns." And I finally had to say, like, "Hey, due respect, shut up. Can we move on from this?" You know, I had a mentor growing up, and my mentor turned into a second father figure. He died in 2018, and I had heard that Ibogaine would let you communicate with the dead. Okay, cool. Let's try. Let's ask, right? So I asked the medicine if I could see Ted, and the medicine answered me, "Not now. There's too much in here to fix." The last vision that I had, appropriately enough, was a piece of glass that had been fouled by this thick, sticky, black goo. Think like motor oil left out to dry or something, really nasty, dark, ugh, right? And a hand came from the left side of the field of view, and it was holding a squeegee. The hand ran the blade of the squeegee down the glass, and the glass became clear again. And behind the glass was my heart. In spite of the depression and everything that had been going on, my family and I had found a church in about 2022, thanks to my 9-year-old, of all people, then 9-year-old. I've come to believe that prayers for the avoidance of suffering sped up the process of my father's death. There's no other explanation that makes sense for the combination of details that ended his life. And I talked to my pastor, and I discussed the journey and the experience of starting to find faith and the details of the journey with him after I got back this past summer. And I told him that I was starting to believe and really have faith before I left, and that I'd come to believe in the power of prayer. But at the same time, there is no amount of prayer that can roto-rooter your brain and relieve almost all of the latent suffering you've had life to date in 36 hours. And Ibogaine did that. That's all I got. Thank you.
Last of the line, huh?
Well, last but not least,
Yeah. I will make this as succinct as possible to respect everyone's time. And I personally am really looking forward to hearing Mr. Hubbard speak. And so my story is a little bit different. It's not my personal story. I'm actually speaking on behalf of my older nephew. His name was Roy O'Dillon Rhubright III. And in 2019, at the age of 26, he was found dead. My family wasn't very close to him, and unfortunately, he was a little bit estranged from us. And he had a lot of childhood trauma, a lot of PTSD. We understand that he was in and out of psychiatric facilities. And when he passed away, we didn't know what caused it. And I reached out to a friend of his, a high school friend, to try and get some answers for my family and for my brother. And his friend said, I don't know if you know this, but Roy was buying psychedelic drugs off the dark web. And Roy, quote unquote, he was trying to fix his brain. And that was pretty intense to hear and to realize that in 2019, my nephew, and this is Montgomery County, I mean, this is a blue collar, a janitor. He didn't know about psychedelic assisted therapy, but he was doing the research and he knew it could fix his brain. So about 6 months later, we finally got the autopsy report back and no drugs came up that they typically test for. And the only cause of death was an enlarged heart. So we won't ever really get any definite answers. We won't know what actually he bought off the dark web. We won't know if what he bought he ingested and that's what killed him. What we do know is that had he had safe access to these medicines, he'd be sitting right here with me, advocating the same way that I do. I think it's really important at this time, like it's so beautiful. We're having this renaissance. We have these brilliant minds that are doing amazing things, but it's so critical that we educate people on what these medicines can and cannot do. They are selling Iboga on TikTok and Instagram. We must educate people and let them know what these things can do. These are amazing and we're at such a critical time. So I'm gonna wrap up really quick and I wanna thank you for listening.
Panelists, that was beautiful and heartbreaking and beautiful. Thank you all very, very much for being willing to share with us. Thank you for the first.